Hello and welcome to this installment of Vox Machina. As your narrator, I'll be bringing fantastic works of fiction from the page to your eardrums. Uploads will be posted weekly, so be sure to subscribe and hit the alerts bell to be notified when new installments are available. Got a story you think deserves the Vox Machina treatment? Let me know in a comment and you might just hear it in a future episode. Thanks for listening and on with the show. How to Train Your Malfoy by Fencer X. Episode 10. At length, maybe seconds later, maybe hours, there was movement in the nearby brush, and Harry struggled to roll over onto his side, just in case the falcon animagus had swooped back around for another go. He didn't know where his wand was, that was probably not good, and he couldn't feel his casting arm, but he was hoping that was just because he'd been lying on it awkwardly, and all would be settled right once he'd gotten feeling back into it. He didn't know how to mend bones. After the Lockhart fiasco, he'd decided to have professionals tend to those sorts of injuries going forward, and he doubted Draco did either. Assuming he was Draco. God, it was dark now, and if the dragon had decided to just fuck off and go terrorize a muggle village like the great worms of old, he was... Harry? Harry! Fuck it all! Potter! Shit! Someone grabbed him roughly by the shoulders, holding him into a seated position, and his stomach wrenched, causing him to cry out in pain. Fuck! Fuck! Get your shit together! Don't think just because you spent the last 2.5 months nursing me back to health that I'm in any way inclined to return the favour. Animal panic gave Draco's voice an unmistakable quaver that sounded almost like he was on the verge of tears, but that was ridiculous. Wait. Consciousness came back to Harry in a rush, and his eyes shot open as he groped for the front of Draco's shirt, bowling his fists in the fabric as he held on for dear life. He was still wearing the same old Gryffindor Quidditch team jersey that Malfoy had been wearing. God, had it even been half an hour ago? Ew. He was breathing hard, and his mouth was dry. Are you... Draco? Or Malfoy? What a ridiculous question. He was speaking full sentences, and ragging on Harry. This wasn't Malfoy. Draco seemed to have much the same opinion on the absurd quality of the question. What? His face scrunched up in confusion, and his hair was all rumpled, his own breath coming in great panting gasps. What? But Harry didn't have time for guessing. He had to know. He couldn't bear it if he was wrong. Are you or him? Draco was shaking his head, though. I have no idea how to answer that. Fuck, you're concussed. Or else your brains have been completely scrambled. Not that most would notice, but I have a sharp eye. It helped that Harry had no idea how Draco should answer either. Oh shit, he'd have to figure it out himself. He reached a shaky hand up and cupped Draco's jaw like he had the night before. And this time, Draco did not lean into it, though neither did he pull away. You? Draco tensed his jaw, then gently drew Harry's hand back down to his side, a pink tongue darting out to wet his lips. He ducked his head. As much as I ever was, I fear. Prove it. Draco's head snapped back up, expression bewildered, and he blinked rapidly. He wrinkled his nose in consternation, and then took a breath. Your nose mended crooked from where I stepped on it in 6th year, and now your glasses sit cockeyed. Harry's hand went immediately to his nose now, feeling for the shape of it. They do not. Shut up. Do they? And then he was smiling and laughing, and oh, that hurt a lot. He doubled over, causing Draco to release a new string of oaths, panic thick in his voice. Don't do that, you absolute nitwit! Fuck, you're going to bleed out. Won't that be a fine turn of the tables? I don't even get the pleasure of doing it myself. He cast about, eyes wide and white, then turned back to Harry, head ducked close. Can you stand? Don't answer that, you're going to have to. We're sitting peacocks out here in the open, should any more guests come calling. Sitting ducks? Draco wasn't making any sense, but that could have been the blood loss. Ducks? Why would anyone curse ducks? It's the fucking peacocks that go around shitting on anything that'll sit still long enough. Up, or I'll levitate you back inside myself if I have to. He slid a shoulder under one of Harry's arms, helping him to his feet, and Harry was reminded of that first night when Hermione had shown up on his doorstep, her shoulder under Draco's. He wondered if Draco remembered that now too. "Where were the others?" he asked, squinting. His glasses had gone flying when he'd taken his tumble, and everything beyond Draco's face, inches from his own, was now rendered in a soft blur. "There was a bird. I took care of them. But if they get away, they could—" "I took care of them," Draco said, very deliberate, jaw tense and gaze fixed straight ahead. "Now walk. Your wards are stronger inside the cottage than out. Probably why they waited to jump us." Harry frowned up at him. "How did you know about my wards?" And Draco let his gaze slide over to Harry's. His eyes were little more than faint pinpricks of light in the wan illumination cast by the ever-burning lanterns floating around the garden. "You told me." Harry swallowed. "You remember that?" Draco shifted his gaze ahead again, stalking forward and dragging Harry along with him. "I remember everything." Harry's stomach gave another wrench, and it wasn't because of his wound this time. "Those were unspeakables," Draco said, shouldering his way inside the cottage. He was breathing heavily from the effort of dragging Harry up the steps, and Harry half wanted to tell him to just cast leather corpus and be done with it. "How the hell did they find us? You won't even let your gaggle of Weasleys know where you're shacking up." "I don't know. It's only Hermione and Ron who know the coordinates. Something must have happened to them. They'd never give it up willingly, not even under torture, I'm positive." "There are other ways of extracting information than base torture," Draco said darkly, and Harry decided he couldn't think about that right now. "I have to know. There might be more coming. It might not even be safe to be here at all now. Fuck!" He seized when his foot caught on the threshold, nearly sending him to his knees and wrenching the muscles over his stomach. Draco was immediately there, supporting him and hauling him back up. "And what, you're going to just pop into their flat, in your condition? Forget your fan club, you need a healer. St. Mungo's. They've probably got a bed reserved for you and everything." Harry shook his head. That wasn't an option for a dozen different reasons. "I couldn't apparate as far as London in one go, even if I wanted to, and besides, I can't leave you here alone, unless you're offering to side along me." He still had no intention of going to St. Mungo's over Hermione and Ron's place, but at least there were options if Draco had his full capabilities once more. Draco looked stricken, though, features screwing up in frustration. I don't think I don't even know where we are, let alone how far— Fuck. Harry's chest clenched. This was well and truly Draco, all traces of the affable Malfoy subsumed by the prickly personality Harry had endured for nearly 7 years. This was Draco, who hated to admit when he couldn't do something, and more so, hated to admit when he couldn't do something in front of Harry Potter. He didn't want to seem weak, no matter that he had a perfectly good excuse for it. Harry probably would have been pressed to apparate 5 feet if he'd gone without casting, without even knowing who he was, a whole summer, let alone as long as it'd probably been for Draco. Draco didn't remember why such weakness in front of Harry galled him quite so much, but Harry did. "I don't know if you noticed, but you just expended rather a lot of energy just now, and it makes more sense to conserve what you've got left than to press on and probably splinch both ourselves." He patted himself down with one hand. "Fuck, my wand." "Oh." Draco reached into his back pocket, palming the bit of holly and pressing it into Harry's grasp. "Tom found it under the rose bush. He seems to think this means he gets doubly compensated, just so you're aware. I wouldn't expect to be eating any dishes involving tomatoes or potatoes for the next 2 planting seasons at least." "Worth it." Harry sighed, then eased off Draco to try and stand on his own 2 feet. He managed it, but barely, and Draco still had a proprietary arm around his midsection that he decided he was all right with. "Expecto Patronum!" The stag materialized from the tip of his wand and trotted around the sitting room before coming to stand dutifully before Harry. "Tell Hermione we've been attacked and that I need to know she and Ron are okay. We're staying put for now, but if we need to seek shelter elsewhere, please let us know as soon as possible." He then flicked his wand, sending the stag off to deliver its message. It was a fine enough compromise for now, but as soon as he'd rested a few hours, they were going to London, even if he had to spellotape his gaping stomach wound closed himself. He noticed Draco watching the Patronus gallop away, an odd sort of longing on his features, and Harry smiled. "Thanks for not destroying it. Maybe you can have a go at Hermione's or Ron's when they respond." Draco's cheeks flushed brightly. Don't be ridiculous." He cut Harry a sharp look. "I'm not an animal." "I know," Harry said. "I'm glad." They bypassed the sitting room and Harry's comfortable armchair to help Harry hobble directly to the bedroom. I worry once I'm down I won't be getting back up for a while. Draco eased him onto the mattress, helping Harry divest himself of the bloody, shredded mess that had once been one of his favourite button-ups. It had an owl stitched into the chest pocket that would occasionally pop its head up out of the pocket and hoot at passers-by. Draco managed a fair ferula that neatly knitted the flesh over Harry's stomach together again, though he had no magic that could ease the pain, nor would it heal any internal injuries. Harry's medicinal cupboard, too, was bare of anything approaching a healing potion or even a blood-replenishing potion. "You're fucked if you really do have a concussion and you fall asleep, you realize that," Draco said, that quaver back in his voice that said he was very frightened and vulnerable enough to show it just now. "I'll be fine," Harry said, with absolutely no reason to believe he would be. "I'm very hard to kill, you'll remember." "Unfortunately," Draco sighed, then shook his head. "Let it be on your head, then. You're not my problem." He then eased off the mattress where he'd settled to mend Harry's visible wounds and slipped his wand into his back pocket, shuffling from the room. Harry snapped a hand out to stay Draco, grabbing the hem of his old Quidditch jersey. "Where are you going?" Draco frowned down at the hand that was clutching at him and carefully but firmly removed it from his person. "I assumed you were about to try and fall asleep and likely slip into a coma, leaving me in the middle of nowhere with naught but my wits to defend myself." Oh. He was leaving Harry to rest, alone, as was normal, and Harry knew that. He did. He wasn't concussed. He didn't think so, at least, and his brains hadn't been scrambled. It was only he'd gotten used to sharing his bed with Malfoy. So used to it, it almost felt strange to fall asleep alone, without the soft, even breathing of another person at your back to send you off. "Right, yeah, of course. Sorry. But, I don't really have a guest room, and it's not like you haven't been sleeping with me the entire time already." "Do not finish that sentence," Draco interrupted, voice sharp as a knife's edge. "I'm not your fucking crap you invite into your bed to keep your toes warm. I'm not sleeping in here. I shouldn't have done so in the first place. He gestured vaguely toward the hallway. "I'll transfigure the sofa in your studio. Trust it won't tax my reserves, despite all that energy I just expended." The snide tone he took said he was very much aware that Harry had been patronizing him before and did not appreciate it. Draco slammed the door behind himself as he stomped out, and Harry lay there in the quiet darkness, staring up at the ceiling for several long minutes after. All that time he'd spent living Draco's memories, and he still hadn't managed to figure him out. He hadn't seemed so very complicated, but clearly he was more complex than Harry was giving him credit for. Maybe he'd never figure it out. Maybe there was no real way to ask someone to platonically, sleep in your bed with you. He strained his ears to try and hear what Draco was doing, if he'd really gone to bed down in the studio, or if he'd collapsed into Harry's armchair, or even if he'd headed to the kitchen to make the dinner they'd wound up skipping on account of fighting for their lives. God, Draco was back. Except he'd never left. He'd just been forced through a strainer that filtered out all the bitterness and pettiness and preoccupation with status and image, leaving behind his base elements, a curious, mischievous creature who was still unaccountably jealous and accountably self-confident and completely and utterly obsessed with Harry Potter. But filtering all that away had sanded down the edges that made him interesting, that made getting to know him a challenge, and before, Harry hadn't thought him worth the effort, but now... Well, Draco had probably eaten someone for Harry. That merited at least a second chance. Sleep was no friend of his tonight, but he did at least try to rest, closing his eyes and forcing his breathing to even. But most every bone in his body hurt right about now, and his mind was still racing, worry mounting with each ominous tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Why hadn't Hermione or Ron sent a Patronus back, letting him know what had happened? Because they're dead. An unhelpful, insidious little voice crooned in his ear, and he struggled to shrug it off. When this, too, proved unsuccessful, he decided he needed a nice cup of tea, or maybe a whole pot. A spot of chamomile with a splash of milk had worked wonders bordering on magic in the past. Perhaps it would be similarly effective in settling his nerves tonight as well. He eased off the bed, transfiguring his wand into a cane, and hobbled for the door, opening it slowly in case Draco was already asleep. He didn't want to endure another 10 rounds of "get your ass back in that bed and rest or I'll put you in a body bind and send you there myself." Only a couple of hours he'd been back, and already Harry was kind of missing Harry. The door to the studio was open, though, and Harry paused in the hallway as he passed, peeking in, and saw Draco, sitting on the sofa, hunched forward with his head in his hands and wand on the table before him. Harry swallowed, then knocked softly on the door to draw his attention. Draco startled, shooting up straight as one hand reached for his wand. He relaxed, though only a tick, when he saw Harry standing outlined by the light from the hallway and casting a long shadow over the bookshelves. Fuck. Speak up if you're going to sneak up on someone. I'm understandably a bit on edge just about now. I could have exploded you before you even opened your mouth. Dubious. I won all our duels. I reckon I could have taken you. You terrified me you'd gone mad when you started speaking to snakes the first time. Harry and Draco clearly remembered this encounter very differently, but Harry did have the advantage of having recently relived it. You flayed me alive with an illegal spell the second time. All right, he had a point. And you caught me off guard when you physically tackled me the third time. None of those ought to count as a win. Draco rubbed his hands over his face. What are you doing in here? Is something wrong? No, Harry said. And yes. He shuffled inside, nudging Draco's foot with his own until he shifted over to make room on the little sofa that was still a sofa and not a bed, then settled down. He took note of the fact that Draco was still wearing his trousers, as well as Harry's Quidditch jersey. Couldn't sleep? Draco made a face. These cushions feel like they're stuffed with gravel. I can't believe you were going to make me sleep here. I recall you finding them comfortable enough to nap on while I sketched. Or was my company simply worth the crick in your neck? Draco shot him a dark glare, and Harry reminded himself such topics were not fair game. Not yet, at least. He leaned forward, an elbow resting on one knee and head supported in his palm. You were really in there the whole time, weren't you? Draco crossed his arms over his chest, refusing to look Harry in the eye. Sometimes I thought I could see. Draco scoffed and stood, pushing past the leg Harry stretched out to block him, and Harry realized there wasn't going to be any going about this gently. Draco didn't respond well to that sort of thing, not if your name was Harry Potter, at least. He only recognized force, being pinned in with no choice but to listen. You couldn't give him a choice. He always chose poorly. Harry was reminded of the thick-shelled egg he'd found when he dived into Draco's, Malfoy's, mind with legilimency. You had to be dedicated enough to chip through it if you wanted to engage with the actual person beneath all the bitter bravado. I told you I was ready to listen. Draco froze, then clenched a fist, and Harry continued in a rush in case Draco was just about to deck him. All you ever wanted was for me to just listen to you, to give a shit about you. But you were an arsehole and so was I, so it never happened. And maybe you're still an arsehole, but I'm trying not to be. Or at least to be less of one. So sit back down on my actually very comfortable sofa, thank you very much, and talk to me. Tell me all the things you wanted to, but I wasn't ready for. Don't make me do this. I won't. But we can't stay like this. And we can't go back to that. Harry wouldn't. He refused. I promise, I won't laugh, I won't be a smartass, and I won't make fun of you. And Draco laughed, slumping back onto the sofa and throwing his head back. His throat formed a delicate arch, bobbing as he swallowed. God, I wish you would. At least I'd know what to do with that. At least that's familiar. Harry could sympathize with not knowing how to approach someone you thought you had pegged, only to find they were nothing like you expected. I don't know how to talk to you. It felt so simple before. I knew just what to say, and you knew just what I was saying. I don't know how you did, but you did. Or maybe I didn't know what I was saying until you told me. He firmed his jaw. Just because you're ready to listen doesn't mean I'm ready to talk. Harry drew his legs up, shuffling further down the sofa to give Draco the space he seemed to be in desperate want of right about now. Don't think of me as me, then. Pretend we're friends. Pretend I'm someone you don't hate. Pretend you maybe even like me. Draco shunted his gaze Harry's way, eyes hooded and so dark Harry could only see tiny pinpricks of reflected light looking back. I don't know if I can do that. And Harry heard it in every way it was meant. Draco might not have those memories, but Harry certainly did, and he swallowed thickly. Well, try anyway. Sometimes that's the best we can do, and who've you got to impress besides? Draco leaned forward again, back hunched and elbows resting on his knees. Why did you do it? I know Granger asked you to, but I won't pretend I was ever anything but horrible to you. The last time you tried to save me, I made you regret it. And Harry had to laugh at this, a dry, huffy thing without much mirth. No, you didn't. Not that you didn't try. What was I supposed to do? Tell her no? To put you back where she found you? He began picking at a nail that had chipped in the earlier fight. At first, I did it because I mostly felt sorry for you. You'd made some shite decisions, but certainly nothing that deserved what had been done to you. You needed my help, so I gave it. End of transaction. There was a long, quiet beat. And then? And then... Harry shrugged to himself. And then I did it for other reasons. He could feel Draco scrutinizing him, picking him apart, which, fine, he was welcome to try. Not once in all those memories had he ever seen Draco demonstrate any skill with legilimency, so Harry trusted his thoughts were his own to muddle over. How you've survived to the age you are truly baffles me. I'd say your bleeding heart is going to get you killed one day, but you keep defying me. Harry scoffed, one brow arched. What, you're saying you wouldn't have done the same if it was me who showed up on your doorstep needing saving? He squared his jaw. Because you and I both know that already happened, as well as how it ended. And Harry also knew, even if Draco didn't, that Draco had also done it for reasons entirely separate from feeling sorry for Harry. Draco gave a gruff, rasping laugh. Right. So this was, what, balancing the scales? Harry leaned forward. It was me saving you, and finally doing it right. I don't help people because I want something in return or to repay favors. I help them because their well-being means something to me. And Draco had nothing smart or acrid to snap back with this time, so Harry pressed on. My turn now. Why did you do it? Draco's expression waxed confused, and Harry gently cleared his throat. Hermione said that it was just instinct, hormones, and imprinting or some such. She called it courting. That is absolute hogwash, Draco huffed, and in the low lamplight Harry could see that even his ears were turning pink. Then what was it if not that? I'm prepared to accept that some of the things he did weren't necessarily things you'd ever do yourself. I don't actually think Draco Malfoy likes to chase garden gnomes for fun at the weekends. He took a bracing breath. I'm trying to figure out where he ends and you begin. And how much of him is still in there, or how much of you was ever in him? When Draco still balked, casting about the studio for anything else to look at but Harry, he continued. I saw you in so many little things. I didn't even realize I was looking for you, but I guess I was. But I can't tell if it was really you or if I just wanted it to be you. Draco was shaking his head. Don't ask that, please. But Harry was through being polite. I need to know. Was it just him, or was it you? I've never been nice to you before, and I'm not about to start now. I've dealt with you saying nothing but Harry for 2 months. I will have my answers now that you can actually string together a sentence. So use those bollocks I know you've got, because God help me I've seen them, and talk. Draco seemed to be having a stroke before Harry's very eyes, twitching and grunting and looking at once both offended and ashamed. Eventually, though, he managed to steel himself and snarled, Why? Why the fuck would you even care? Why do you want to listen now of all times when I haven't got anything interesting to say? Because I think you do have something interesting to say, which should tell you why the fuck I even care. Draco's face twisted into a pathetic grimace. I don't know what to say. But truth's a good place to start. And he scoffed, a harsh, barking thing. Fuck that. I know you're no Ravenclaw, but surely some things don't need to be spelled out. This does, Harry said. He leaned forward, heedless of the stab of pain that ripped through his abdomen when he moved. For me, it does. Well, Draco said, waspish, we can't always get what we want, can we? And Harry swallowed, summoning the whole of his Gryffindor courage, long laid in storage and gathering dust. What if you could? Draco straightened, and then he looked terrified, jaw tense and nostrils flaring. Don't. Why did you do it? I didn't! Draco shouted, loud enough it echoed a bit in the open space, and he seemed to collapse in on himself, head in his hands. I never would have, because I'm too much of a fucking coward. So go on. He waved a hand, gesturing a bit maniacally now as his emotions mounted. Listen all you want. I'm not going to say it. I can't. He grabbed one of the throw pillows from the sofa and threw it across the room where it collided with a bookshelf with a soft whoomp. He'd always had a flair for the dramatic, and Harry had to admit he'd kind of missed it, at least when it manifested in benign, silly ways like this. Harry nodded, then licked his lips. Fine. Then I'll be brave for you.